So I've been a professional audiobook narrator for the past going on 4 years, basically just narrating audiobooks full time. Throughout this time, I've been asked the same questions, the same sort of 10, 15 questions pretty consistently. So I thought, since it's lockdown and we're not doing anything else, I'd record this video just basically discussing these questions and hopefully answering them to a satisfying point. To kick off with, we're going with my favourite one, which is, have you ever thought about doing voice acting in films? This one's great because it's a compliment, essentially. Somebody thinking that you're good enough to, do voiceovers or voice act in like animations or that sort of thing, or video games, etc. But then there's also this funny bit where it's they haven't expected you to think about it, and them bringing it up. It's like they don't think that you've realised the possibility before. And basically the answer is yes, you would absolutely love to do voice acting and be in animations and video games and all the like. But I just haven't had the opportunity to put myself out there, or have put myself out there and haven't got the job. But yeah, it's a little bit of a weird one, and you'd be surprised how many times you hear it. The second is, how did you start doing that? So obviously audiobook narration to the majority of people is not a job that you hear about very often. It's usually quite a surprise when somebody asks what you do, and it's kind of fun at parties to say something that they weren't expecting, or at least that's what I think with my ego. But essentially, and I will make a video just solely on this, essentially I started my sort of media journey, if you will, behind the camera, and I was looking to do more producing roles and I was actually producing TV packages for a factual local-based culture show, which was fun. And then from there we had the opportunity to produce like an audio space, but we couldn't afford the actors to come and audition, the voice actors to come and audition for like audiobooks or commercials and stuff. So I ended up doing the audition, got the job, and basically I just haven't stopped since. I've just carried on doing it, and it's what pays the bills, and yeah, that's how it went. The next one sort of ties in and is usually the next question that they ask from the previous one, which is, people pay you to read books? Yeah, I know. I don't know why either. Do you practice accents, or is it something you could always do? It's kind of like a hybrid of mix. Basically, everything that you do requires practice, right? That's any skill, or people very rarely are born with the ability to do something amazing. You can do something kinda, and then you work on it, and then that becomes, that turns into something passable. So it's the same with accents. So I started just being able to do like a little bit of an American accent or a little bit of a Scottish accent, etc. And then you work on that. And usually it's just by hours and hours of making silly voices around the house. It's quite a fun process. Unless you're the person listening to the person who's practicing accents, that isn't very fun. How hard is it to swap accents during a chapter? It kind of depends. It depends on like how you're feeling while you're performing. Some days it's just easier than others. It also depends on how different the characters are. So I always find it easier if the voices are very different. So if there's like a deep sort of rumbling, I don't know, British person, and then sort of like a sort of medium paced, quite quickly paced like female character who's American, I find it pretty easy to jump back and forth. There's always going to be like a few moments where you have to kind of stop and pause. There's always going to be more retakes on scenes like that, which go back and forth quite a lot consistently. But usually it's not too bad. Sometimes it's horrendous though, if there's accents that you're not 100% on, that you have to sort of do a fair few takes. If the character's only, got a few lines or something, you do like a fair few takes. If you're having to bounce around on that, sometimes that can take a while. How long do you read for, and is it scheduled or just based on how you're feeling? So there is this misconception that narrating audiobooks must be a lot like reading books for pleasure, and that's just sort of very rarely have a schedule. You just sort of pick it up, and if you're not really feeling it, you put it back down again. With this being a job, obviously you can't do that. You have to schedule out your time, and you have to stick with it because you have deadlines. So you have to reach them effectively if you want to get paid. So I never, or very, very rarely, on a few occasions, have had to stop because I wasn't really feeling it, but that's due to either fatigue or illness or something like that, or something's come up like an emergency or something. But usually it is just you schedule some time, and I'll schedule from about 10 o'clock in the morning until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon of just solid reading, which is actually quite a lot harder than you might think. Doesn't sound very much, but it is quite a lot when you're just reading something straight off into a microphone. So yeah, in a nutshell, yeah, it's all scheduled. It has to be. It's a job, essentially. Do you listen to audiobooks for fun? Yeah, it actually surprised me as well that you enjoy them more. Most of the time. Sometimes you'll hear something, like if you edit audiobooks, you can hear, like you get a sort of attuned to certain clicks and mouth pops. And when you hear that in somebody else's work and you're there thinking, you should have taken that out, that can drive you crazy. But on the majority of the time, it actually enhances your enjoyment because you get to appreciate what the narrator or the production team have done. And you kind of think, actually, you know, they've done a crazy amount of work to do this audiobook, so props to them, and that makes you enjoy it more. How do you stay engaged in the content? That is a really good question, because it's tough sometimes. Sometimes it's really, really good, but 100% of the stuff that you're going to be doing isn't always going to be up your street. There's obviously going to be things, there's going to be books or series that just really, you would only do them if you were getting paid, really. Not to say that they're bad, they're just not up to your... They're not up your street. You might like, you know, sci-fi, and this might be, you know, romance or whatever, and it might not be your thing. So it is sometimes difficult to be engaged, especially if you're tired, especially towards the sort of last quarter of the session. It can be really, really tough. But the idea is to the best thing that I've found is just take lots of breaks, small breaks. Keep hydrated, obviously that helps with the throat, but it also helps to keep you awake. And if you are really, really sort of nodding off, you sort of need a bit of a stern talking to with yourself and think, right, listen, I've got 45 minutes left, and then I can go on to the next task. So I need to focus, I need to get in the zone, and usually sort of convince yourself out of this sort of slump. Worst case scenario, and you just cannot get in it and you think it's affecting the performance, then just stop and either pick it up later that day or the next day. But then just be careful not to obviously mess up your deadlines because you're sort of gone off kilter with your schedule. So there we have it. Those are the most common questions that I get asked or have been asked multiple times over the past 3 years and 10 months or something, pretty much 4 years. So if you're an audiobook narrator and you've heard different ones, then please let me know what those questions are and we can have a bit of a laugh together about them and hopefully answer them. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for clicking on it. If you have any other questions or just any sort of comments or anything, please feel free to let me know. And yeah, thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next one.